Before we get started, question for the room. Does anyone here like the game I came from or know what this game is? Great. What about a game like Hollow Knight? I'm sure everyone here knows what Hollow Knight is. I'm sure all of you enjoy it. And if no one here knows what this last game is, I'll be very surprised. But who here likes Hades? Well, congratulations, all of you enjoy some of the worst games of the past 10 years. Some of just the absolute most horrible games, and I'm glad this is being recorded as well for me to say this. But this is not a Filmfish 2.0 moment. I am not the one who actually said those words. I enjoy these games. However, the people who play them, the vast majority of them, have said something similar about them. And understand why they did that and what this means for your own indie game, you are in the right place. So welcome to How to Cite Your Game's Success and Do Better the Next time. I may add an asterisk and say hopefully do better, because there is no such thing that's guaranteed when it comes to game dev. But who is this strange person standing in front of you who hates indie games, puppy dogs, and I'm sure sunshine and rainbows? My name is Josh Beister. I run the website and channel Game Wisdom. I have interviewed hundreds of developers, from first-timers to professionals, everyone in between, over the past, my goodness, going on 12 years now since I started. I have written the series of books, Game Design Deep Dive, that covers game design. My expertise is talking about game design, game mechanics, systems, approachability, UI, UX, all that great stuff. That is an artist rendering of me jumping into my pile of indie games to find another one to play. I should put a screenshot of the Eye of Sauron for when I start reviewing and looking at them. But over the past 12 years, I've been covering the game industry, I've been examining game design, I've been interviewing developers, and that's where a lot of my knowledge base comes from, and why I talk so much about kind of the importance of the business and understanding kind of the inner workings of design. Give me a talk about mechanics and systems, and I will talk about for at least an hour to 2 hours minimum. But the heart of this presentation is, what is success when it comes to game dev? Some people will define success as someone who's not a family or friend looking at my Steam page. Someone else may think success is, if I don't buy that 5th private island, then I'm going to be sad for the rest of this year. But we can all agree that when it comes to making video games and selling them, money is a very useful and easy to understand metric. Money can be exchanged for goods and services that we all know and love. Stuff like pizzas and housing, which we can all agree are equally important. And whether you like pizzas of homes or homes of pizzas, another aspect of this is that people like large numbers. Number built up is a very important metric for a lot of video games. Game journalists, YouTubers, streamers, everyone who likes to cover the game industry likes to talk about when a game does really well. When you have a title like Lotro, Stardew Valley, Minecraft, where you go back to Slay the Spire, FTL, pick a major game over the past 14 years. That game that comes out that redefines a genre or coins a new genre, they become the new standard for it. And those games succeed really well. But it is time for a kind of a returning guest or current guest for this topic. These are sad news for game, things that I have learned from watching from the outside and talking to plenty of developers over the years. And for our first one, a studio cannot grow from one game. Now you're probably saying, well, what about the Lotro, Minecraft, and games I just mentioned a minute ago? The question is, or the answer is, what about them? Unless everyone in this room or watching this recorded is about to go out and make the next genre-defining game or create a new genre, that doesn't apply to you. It is something that I have seen from developers so many times over the past 14 years. They will put out one great game, and then they will either chase that game for the next 4 or 5 years, or try to double or triple down on that game, and it never works. Or it may work, but with far less or fewer numbers in their first game. And one of the saddest exercises that I've had to watch is a game that I enjoy. I try to find that developer 5 years later, and that studio is either closed, or they've moved on to something else. And that takes me to another sad one. You're going to be seeing this slide a lot, or this section a lot in this presentation. Consumers do not equal fans. This is something that a lot of people, I think, may have a hard time understanding, but what I mean by this is that you think that anyone who buys your game is automatically guaranteed to love your next game or the game after that. It doesn't work that way. And there's different kinds of people who buy and will consume your games. So I created this lovely little pyramid to demonstrate. At the very top are the fans. These are the people who know you, they will love you, and they will do everything they can to help you succeed. They will market your game. They will shout out on social media. These are the good people for you. They will be the smallest number of people who will be playing your games. Next down is the average consumer. These are the people who will find your game because maybe an influencer really like a Markiplier, Northern Lion, Beartabby, picking, play their game, they show it off, and they're like, you know what, that game looks good, I want to play it. These are the people who you can convert to fans. But at the same time, they do not care about your life story. They don't care if the game took 2 years, 10 years, you took out 1 mortgage, 3 mortgages on your home. They don't care. What they care about is what they see on Steam and whether or not that game meets those metrics that you set them. And if it doesn't, they're gone. The next group are the sale hunters. For every developer in this room, you've probably seen someone say something along the lines of, I'll try your game when it's 8% off, 90%, maybe when it's 99%. These are the people who they have very little investment in you or your game. They're the ones that they're not going to stick around if anything bothers them. And at the very bottom of the list are the bundle people. The people who get your game from Humble, Games Pass, Fanatical, pick any one of those sites. A lot of times, it may not even know they own your game. I've rebought many different games that I found on Fanatical or Humble, and I found, wait, I already own this game? And it's something that I picked up like 5-6 years ago that I may just get. But this is a group that they are not going to be invested in. Oh, I think I slid too far. Okay, there. But to prove that investment in this game, I think I'm missing a slide somewhere, but it will show up somewhere. But when you talk about people's investment in games, a lot of you or a lot of consumers and developers will think that people will be invested in anything, even the most popular games. So I already spoiled it, but everyone, I'm sure, has never heard of Vampire Survivors. No one here has ever played. As everyone watches this recorded, this is the first time. But as someone who has had to cover Bullet Heaven Fest, who has played probably 70 different Bullet Heaven games in the past 4 years, I am very well acquainted with this game. It has coined the Bullet Heaven genre, as I just said. It is a game that, by no as underestimated, it has succeeded. It is a game that will probably be remembered for a very long time. And the countless games that have come out, probably not. Maybe Rotado is one of the second most popular. And I could do a whole presentation on Bullet Heavens if people want to see that. But this is a good representation of what Vampire Survivors is. Everyone here watching can immediately know what this game is about. But it is a game that has done extraordinarily well. So here's an achievement. This is the very first achievement of Vampire Survivors. All you need to do to get this achievement is play the game for 60 seconds. Hit start, let the game load. You could go get a drink, and you get this achievement. So, for everyone watching this, do you think that this achievement has 100% on Steam? Everyone who has played this game on Steam must have played this game for at least 1 minute. Well, the answer is no. There is 1.8% of the people who bought this game on Steam and said to themselves, 60 seconds for an achievement? I don't think so. And they stopped playing a game as simple as this. And in order to get people to play your game, or to get them to be interested in you, the longer that they are invested in your title, the greater the chance that it is. So I've organized these into 3 different groups of how someone will approach a game, the general consumer. And people will quit for any number of reasons. And don't worry, that sentence will come back in a few seconds. But if people are leaving your game before they even finish the tutorial, yes, that has happened in a lot of games. Trust me on that one. They are not turning into a failure. If someone can play your game beyond 2 hours, yeah, there's a chance they're going to stick around. And if someone 100% your game, if they master it, new game plus it, new game plus it, I'm hoping they're a fan. Although there are people on Steam who have played games for like 1,600 hours and said, I don't recommend this game. Which, that just is like a knife in my heart every time I see that. But this gets at our next sad rule. People will stop playing your game for any reason. For quite literally any reason. If your title screen takes too long to load, your game doesn't have volume settings, if the tutorial takes more than 30 seconds, they're leaving. And if they leave like this, they're not coming back. And I have seen this happen time and time again. And this takes us to the magic word for this presentation, churn. The nightmare word to describe the rate in which people will leave a game. Churn rates are one of the more underrated or easily misunderstood metrics when it comes to games. People love to talk about big numbers. Game sells 600,000 copies. There's 10 quintillion concurrent users on Steam. They love those ratings. What they don't talk about is how many people are still playing that game, how many people are invested in it. Because this is how you can start to understand who are the actual fans of my game, who is the actual consumer for it. So this goes back to a story that happened like 5-7 years ago. I'm not going to name the developer, but they were proud and they were bragging about their game on social media, saying, my game sold 300,000, it was like 300,000 or 500,000 copies. And they were like making fun of people who were arguing about their game, that didn't like their game. And they're like, well, who cares? My game sold all these copies, so why should I care about these complaints? So the very first achievement, again, I'm not going to show because that will be a pretty big tell us what that game is basically take 5 steps into the game. So they lost 5.2% of their player base by just not even walking down a street. And then the very next achievement for that game, the kind of like basic progression one, it's now down to 19.2. And that was about 40 minutes to an hour of play. So they lost just about 80% of the people who bought this game before they even play an hour of it. And what that means is that if you're expecting that 300,000, 500,000 to immediately go buy your next game, it ain't happening. And this is a very important point for every game developer watching this, especially if you're trying to build a successful studio. Because if you're trying to grow, you don't want to be losing people from game to game. If your first game sold 500,000 copies and your second game sells 200,000, 100,000, 50K, that's not growth, and it's not how you're going to keep succeeding. But to understand this, and the most easily low-cost way to measure your game's success for your fandom are achievements. People love achievements. They love that, seeing that little icon pop up. And for developers, it is the cheapest way to get an easily trackable metric for your game. There are developers who don't like this. They think it cheapens the game, it ruins things. But this is a simple way to kind of measure if people are liking your game. Did they beat level 1? Did they play 5 minutes? Did they read the in-game manual? This sounds very simple, but a lot of people mess up on this. And especially when it comes to more divisive games like Return to Obra Dinn, Pentiment, any title that is very hard to grasp. These are games that oftentimes become very critically well received. Commercially, it is the opposite. They will oftentimes have massive churn. And some, to be fair, that is to be expected. If you have a game that no one's ever played before, it's very weird or different, more than likely people are going to check it out and go, nope, and they're going to leave. And the people who do like it, they will play through that 100%. They will see every single pixel or frame of secrets in that title. As anyone who's followed, like people do, like the ARPGs and ARPG events, that kind of thing. Like if you look at someone who's played stuff like Undertale, the fans who will break that game to find every single secret in it. But again, while that is true, people will still leave your game for any reason. And the most important thing to understand as a developer and what drives success for you is how much time are they spending in your game. If, as an interesting point, what I do besides all this talking and writing about games, I run a YouTube channel. And a very important metric for YouTube is how long are people watching your content. It's something, because my content is very specific, not a lot of people watch because it's hard to make randomization and roguelikes a very exciting and buzzworthy topic for the general consumer. But for a developer, you want people to be playing your game for more than a minute. Ideally, you want them to be playing for more than 10 minutes, 20 minutes. But this is how we can start to define what is considered your fandom for your game. Whether it is 10% of the people play your game, 50, 70%, whatever. But the more time someone invests in your game, the better it's going to be overall for your studio. So this is a screenshot from Elden Ring, a game that I'm sure, again, everyone here is somewhat acquainted with. So despite being a very hard game, a very long game, it still had 23.6% of the player base who finished it. And that, for a game of that size and that difficulty, is really damn good. Now, a few of you who may be observant may notice, but that achievement rate is about even with the three that I mentioned at the start. I can develop Hollow Knight and Hades. Well, you see, the difference is the size of the game. Most people will churn out of longer games. It's just the nature of the beast. If you can keep someone playing a 40 to 60 hour long game or plus that, you're doing something right. And when it comes to clear rates in games, here's a little fun fact that can bring a lot of misery to a lot of developers watching this. If you think that the average rate of average clear rate for a game is like 50% or higher, it's not. For most games, I've seen an average about 20 to 30% of player base. 30 to 40% is fantastic. You can have at least that amount of people finish your game, you're good. 40 to 50% is just phenomenal, and if you can have 60% or more, and your game's not like a 30-minute long game, I may have to accuse you of cheating, because something is not right there. If you can get 60% or more of people to finish your game. But here is another sad fact, because you may be wondering, well, why don't I just copy Elden Ring? And that leads me down another rabbit hole that I will rant and rave about if people want it. But you see, it's time for another sad rule. AAA games have plans. Guess who doesn't have plans? Exactly. You cannot, as an indie developer, directly compete with a AAA studio. It never works out well. You cannot just say, well, Elden Ring did this, why don't I just do it? Why don't I just be like Nintendo, or Blizzard in their peak, or I'll just make my own path. You see, AAA studios have clout because they have the numbers and the team and the marketing to back that up. When you can promote your game on the Super Bowl, you have clout. I'm sure everyone in here will immediately run out and start getting some time on the next Super Bowl. But for indie developers, you do not have that advantage, unfortunately. And that means that you're going to have to compete somewhere else. And it means you have to convince someone that your game is worth playing. So I've been talking about 15, 20 minutes. It's important. I think it's an important question to ask. Why does this matter? For people in the audience who are game developers, the people watching this recorded, you're probably sitting there going, who cares what this guy is saying? Why does this even mean anything? And for a certain group of developers, it doesn't. If you're an artist, you're someone who's working on tech demos, or you're making little projects, you have no intention of making a living with video games, this whole presentation doesn't matter to you. And that's fair. There are a lot of people who get into games strictly from the artistic point of view. They are fine making some projects or making little games that it may just be on itch, and that's it. And that's fine. But if you are trying to survive in this industry, this is a different story. And A major part about this, and something that's become more and more important over the years, is sustainable game development. The idea that every one of your games should not be a do or die. Either we succeed and we're rich and famous, or our studio closes. And for the longest time, a lot of developers have gotten that mentality of, I will invest everything into one game. I will make this the most perfect game that ever perfected. It will sell billions of copies. I will live forever off of it. And yes, I've interviewed those developers as well. They've spent 8 to 10 years plus on a single game. And I can tell you with very 100% certainty, not one of those games ever broke even on it. So you have studios like Hitbox Games, New Blood Interactive, and of course Grey Alien. Who here knows a Grey Alien game by chance? Thank you for coming out. Grey Alien is run by Jake Burkett, who gave a very great talk at GDC, how to survive in the game industry without a major hit. I'm actually going to be posting an interview I did with him and his wife, probably in a few weeks after I'm done here. And he has been a very important person and someone who understands, again, that there is a business to this and that you have to understand that if you want to survive long term. You may get lucky. You may have your first game where you're singing Be That Vampire Survivors or that Elantra. But for those of you who don't, you're not going to have that advantage. And it's time for the major lesson for the presentation. Who here knows Mimimi Games? Yeah. Mimimi are the creators of Shadow Tactics, which is a game that quite literally brought back the entire stealth strategy genre. The likes of Commandos, Desperados, Robin Hood from back in the day. No one was making these games anymore. And they released this in 2016, and it became the studio-defining project. It is a very hard game, and it brought this kind of design back to modern audiences, and it did exceptionally well. Steam Spy, which is another very useful site to get metrics on games. So they report that this game sold has owners between 1 to 2 million. Even if we're being completely pessimistic and saying that they only sold 1 million copies, that's a really damn good number for the first game of the franchise. And if it did sell 2 million, that's also amazing. But it is time for perhaps the saddest rule of all for this game presentation, as even the marketing is starting to lose its mind as well. The first game sales are always inflated. And what I mean by that is that any time a game comes out that does something different, where it's unique, it scratches that itch in the back of our minds and becomes a cultural bestseller, that audience will always be inflated. And we'll have people check this out just by simply word of mouth. If someone, again, like Markiplier covers a game, people will run to check it out. They may not stick around, but they will at least check it out. And what that means from a development standpoint is if you really can't trust the first game sales when it comes to figuring out who is the audience for this. Because if you, again, think that 2 million people who played Shadow Tactics equals 2 million fans, well, it's time for a very rude awakening. So this is the achievement page for Shadow Tactics on Steam. So Shadow Tactics, again, came out in 2016. So at this point, we can assume that these numbers are going to be relatively stable. For most games, you don't really want to look at the churn rates for at least, I would say, minimum 6 months to at least a year after its release. Again, after a year. So this game does not feature progression-based achievements. There's no B level 1, B level 2, but a lot of their achievements are designed around just the casual things you're going to do in that game. So the very first achievement is pickpocket someone with UV. I looked this up to remind myself that happens in level 3 of the game. Level 1 is essentially a tutorial for Shadow Tactics. Level 2 is kind of the first big test, and then 3 is kind of when we're off to the races. So if you look at that lovely little number that I circled, 39.0, we'll round that down to 39% of people who bought and played this game on Steam got to level 3. So that means 61 of the people who played Shadow Tactics never even got past this first or second level. As another point that you can study, when you look at the rates, you can see it goes from 39 to 35 to 33. That's when churn becomes normal. So you're always going to be losing people. Again, there is no game that has 100% clear rate. That is healthy churn. You don't want your game to go from 100, 50, 20, 5, 0.0007. That is not healthy churn. But here's what this means from a development and a studio sample. A potential audience of 2 million. That number transforms into 780,000, which is still really good for an indie game. But it's a very different number than 2 million. And what that means from a development standpoint is that a lot of studios will oftentimes go bigger with their second or third game. They'll take a game that, let's say, has 10 levels. I'm going to make my next game to have 30 levels. It'll be 3 times bigger. I'll spend 3 times the amount of time on it. I'm sure it'll make triple the profit. As every developer watching this right now should be having chest pain as I'm uttering that line. But they did try to go bigger. Their second game after Shadow Tactics was Desperados 3. They got the license to make a new Desperados game. And it was probably even harder than Shadow Tactics, because now you not only have to deal with samurai, you have to deal with guns and sight ranges. And it, again, was a very clear and amazing example of stealth strategy. However, then we look at our owners here. If you notice, that number has gone down from 1 to 2 million in potential to 500,000 to 1 million. So, what we're seeing here, what we are checking out, is that the consumer base is becoming smaller because, well, if people didn't like Shadow Tactics, what makes you think they're going to like Desperados? And what happens in these cases is that as a franchise goes on and on, the consumer base or your hard fans will become more well known, but everyone else, though, is not. And if you are budgeting your game around, well, if 2 million people bought my first game, surely 2 million people will buy the second one, you start to realize there may be a budget problem happening. So, here are the achievement rates for Desperados 3. Now, this is my own Steam page, so I played this one. I didn't even get to the first achievement. It was that hard for me because I'm not a stealth strategy guy. But if you notice, the stabilization rate is at 43.2%, which is high. And this will oftentimes happen with franchises and studios as they go forward. As the number of people shrinks, we're kind of left with more of the hardcore fans, your churn rate should be a little bit higher. If all your fans are quitting your game at the very first mission, something is very wrong with your title. But again, you can see that all the people who are playing Desperados 3, they're not even about 57% of the people who bought this game never even made past the first act of it. And again, you can watch those achievement rates going steadily and steadily down, which that part is normal. 43% stabilization, however, is not. So, it's time to mention this again. So, of the 1 million potential fans of Desperados 3, that number now goes down to 430,000. Still really good, but if you are banking on millions of people to buy your game for it to be a success, that's not what you want to see. And that takes us to their third and final game, Shadowgate. So here's a question. Who here has played Shadowgate? Right. What did you think about it?
Very hard. But it was fun. I liked it.
Yep. And I interviewed the developer, one of the lead designers, from me about a month before the game was released. And a major part of the game was them trying to make things more approachable. They gave them more crazy powers. They were trying to, again, kind of ease the difficulty of tactical or stealth strategy. And in a way, they did succeed in that front. I played a demo to it. And again, having being able to teleport, being able to distract people, that made things easier. But at this point, the well is kind of poisoned in a matter of speaking. If you didn't like Desperados 3, what makes you think you're going to like, again, Shadow Gambit? Just as if you didn't like Shadow Tactics, why would you play Desperados 3? And when we look at that owner number, that is down to 200 to 500,000. A very, very different story than 1 to 2 million. Now, when we look at our achievement rates, again, you can see that the stabilization is occurring higher, now at 47.9%. As another sad fact, you can see that about 15% of the player base did not even kind of like do a very first mission of the game, and only 64.2% beat the first act of it. Again, people will leave your game for any reason. Sometimes they will leave it for a good reason. Let's say real life intervenes and they have to go do something and forget about it. But when you see these rates, you can start to realize that the audience for this kind of genre, they exist. But if you think that's going to be 2 million, 3 million strong, it is not. So, of the potential 500,000 consumers, we're now down to 240,000. Again, a very huge decline from the first game. And when they gave the big announcement about the studio closing, they did cite that they were just not finding the audience. There was just not enough money coming in to keep this series and keep these games going. And it takes me to perhaps one of the saddest rules of all. As again, I'm going pretty much like Shiny here in terms of these orders. Money cannot create more things. You cannot throw infinite money at any genre and will more people to play it. The most super expensive, I will make the super ultra 4K fighting game is not going to attract someone who doesn't like fighting games. There is always a limit to the potential fans of any genre. Now, sometimes that limit could be in millions, as we've seen with platforms, as we saw with something like point and click adventure game. No, I'm sorry, not point and click. Deck builders. Again, there's lots of genres rolling around my head. But point and click adventures do come up here. Because again, throwing more money at a genre, you can make a really great version of it. That doesn't mean people are going to get into this. They may, again, try something just to see the hot new thing. So here's a fun kind of economy. On the left is Street Fighter 6, a game I'm sure everyone is very well acquainted with. So, I'm going to open plea here, but does anyone here recognize the game on the right? We have one hand. And what's the name of that game? Oh, no. Oh, my friend is going to be very sad if he's watching this right now. This is... What was that? No. Oh, man. If you think this is a underappreciated or hidden gem, trust me, I have played even more hidden games than this. That is Unavowed from Magic Eye Games. They are being a lot of point-click adventures. They are perhaps, at this point, arguably the most recognized indie point-click adventure developer. They're made by Dave Gilbert, no relation to Ron Gilbert, who's also an adventure game. Maybe all adventure game designers have Gilbert as a name. But their claim to fame is the Black series. And they have since gone on to develop other adventure games as well as published point-click adventures. So Unavowed came out in 2018. And as you can see, it has an owner base far smaller than Street Fighter 6. But here's an interesting fact. The achievement on the bottom left for Street Fighter, that is to play an online or a match against someone in the battle for the first time. That is sitting at 32%. The achievement Freedom on the right from Unavowed, that is finishing the game. So more people who checked out Unavowed finish the game compared to the fan base of Street Fighter, who even just to play an online match, they said no. Now, of course, however, Street Fighter 6 did do far better in terms of numbers than Unavowed. But this is the kind of stuff that you need to understand when it comes to game development and retaining people. And a lot of that goes to this simple phrase that will be the nightmare for many developers. UI, UX, or user interface, user experience. This is something that I have harped on until my voice dies. It is something that whenever I play any indie game, I am kind of, again, like Eye of Sauron staring into the soul of this game to see how it plays. And what this means for development is understanding how to best onboard someone. Removing frustration, and please, for the love of everything that's good in the world, play test your game. Get people to play it. Because this is how you will see just how good, bad, or in the middle your title is. And again, I have heard horror stories of people who watch other developers who don't let people play test their games. Or the favorite phrase, when they say, "You're playing my game wrong," which, again, the knife is going right into my chest as we're saying it. And it's time for another sad rule. The reason why UI UX matters, you have at most 10 minutes to hook someone and convince them that your game is worth their time. With the Steam refund policy being 2 hours, most people are not taking 2 hours to play your game. And if your game annoys them, frustrates them, makes them unhappy for any reason within 10 minutes, they're gone. Because if it's annoying them in 5 to 10 minutes, it's going to annoy them 1 to 2 hours, and days, and weeks, and months. And as another very scary for the developers here and for developers watching this recording, I've gotten to the point where for a lot of the games I played, I can tell within 10 to 15 minutes of playing whether or not a game has a chance in terms of being successful on Steam. And that will probably scare a lot of people, especially the developers who watch me play their game on the MAGWest floor. But yes, it gets to that point when you've played so many games, you start to understand what it is that is going to keep someone invested, or if it's not. So when you are studying your own game, what are some things you want to learn? Are people quitting your game before they finish a tutorial? It's a very fair question, and yes, it happens more than you may realize. But people who, if they are not figuring out your tutorial, they're not sticking around for anything else. If your tutorial is hard to get, I have played countless strategy and 4X games that even the act of getting to the tutorial can be a night. Of having to start the game, figure out what is the exact starting conditions, and then you're introduced to the Stellaris. Here's 87 blinking lights and symbols all over the page. Try to learn this game if you've never played it. It's a fun challenge for anyone who's never played a 4X. The churn spikes. Again, this is the kind of stuff as a developer you want to be paying attention to. If, again, 100,000 people buy your game, if 50,000 of them are quitting within 5 minutes because of a hard level or because they just didn't figure it out, these are things to notice, and they're things to improve upon on your next game. Because again, what people want to see, especially your fans, is growth. If your first game was, let's say, a C, they would like your next game to be at least a C plus or a B minus. They don't want to see you making the same mistakes over and over again. And the people who don't care about that, they are the worst ones to listen to when it comes to feedback about your title. You've already hooked them. They're not going to go away for any reason. But you will see this from many games, especially those that are very challenging. So when someone new comes in, they're saying, well, can you make this part a little bit easier? I can't figure this out. Can you maybe introduce as a tutorial or put a better modifier in? The hardcore fans will jump on them like a pack of hyenas. And as a developer, you want to be taking notes on this. Not only hyena jumping part, but on the fact that people are having trouble with your game. Because if someone is annoyed or someone's giving you a suggestion, you have to be thinking there's other people who are thinking about this. They may not be responding. Again, a lot of people, when they don't like to play a game, they don't go to the Steam forums and say, this game is stupid, I hate you developer, go to hell, I'm never going to talk to you again. They're just going to go, uninstall that game, and it will go into the backlog, never to be seen again. Or they may refund it. And again, when you're looking at these churn spikes, when does the churn stabilize? When has the bleeding stopped? Has it stopped at 60%, 40%, 10%? Again, I'm making a few developers that they sweat under their shirts right now when it goes down to 5%. But this is the stuff you want to be noticing, because the people who are sticking through your game, if your game is difficult and you can retain at least 30 to 40% of that base, then you know you have some very hardcore fans. But that also means that getting someone who isn't a hardcore fan to try your next game is going to be like pulling teeth. And that takes me to a special rule for game critics. So for developers, you'll need to worry about this, although this may drive you up a wall as well. Because if I have to hear one more YouTuber reaction person talk about single-player games, dying because only if the game day one had 800,000 people playing, and now 4 months later, the single-player game only has 700, I'm going to start pulling out my hair. But for the developers watching, this does not concern you. Again, people are not going to be playing a single-player game every day of their lives for the next 10 years. Multiplayer live service, however, that is a different story. So, to wrap things up, game development, as I'm sure we all can agree on, is very easy. It's as simple as just taking a job like this man right here. Anyone can do it. It is so incredibly easy. You can all pump out games within a few days, I'm sure. But the truth is that it is not. It is a very hard industry to break into. It's very hard to succeed. And one of the things that I've been very excited, or at least happy to see from a lot of newer developers over the past 5 years, has been more of them understanding what it means to make a game feel good. Understanding what do I like about a game, what don't I like. And I have seen some impressive games from first-time developers or the first time working in a genre that are miles above that from established developers. People who go from the AAA to AA space and making their first indie game. I have played lots of games that have just been horrible from that space. Or you would think that someone with 20 to 30 collective years would be phenomenal in making a game. And it turns out that's not the case. And being able to understand this stuff early will always lead to better games, because the fewer mistakes you're making in your first game or while you're doing playtesting or alpha and beta is fewer mistakes you're going to have in your retail game. And again, a lot of people will give a developer the benefit of the doubt for their first game. They're not giving it when it's your 5th, 7th, 10th game if you get that far. And as I said earlier, a very important point about this is sustainability. So, a developer who has been really at the forefront of this and talking about this is Xavier Nelson. I just butchered it. Yeah, what was that? Nelson, thank you. And I hope he's not watching, so I just butchered his last name. No one to tell him that. But he is a developer or the designer from Strange Capital. And in the past few years, he and his studio have been doing a lot in the space of sustainability. Making games to be released very much affordably, making them not to be 5, 10, 15-year projects. And these are just a few of the games that he's released in the past, I think, 2 to 3 years. And they're all made to be very affordable. They're not designed, again, to be these multi-year projects. And this is a very important aspect. And I would also recommend for everyone who hasn't looked up as Alvier to look up some of the talks and interviews he's given in the past year or so, talking more about making these games to be sustainable. So that it's not, again, about, I will put out this game, and if it succeeds, I'm a millionaire. If it doesn't succeed, I'm now out on the street. It's about making games affordable. And again, understanding who your market is. If you're making a very strange or weird game, something like Pickle it's probably not going to do Call of Duty numbers. But there is still an audience for it. And if you can make a game affordable enough that doesn't kill your budget, that will profit from that fan base, that will allow you to make your next game and the game after that. And it's why when we look at games that do succeed or studios that do succeed, a lot of people will think about just that one game, that one phenomenal game that everyone's heard of. What they don't think about is all the prototypes, all the previous games that they had to learn and grow from to get to that point. And a lot of smaller developers don't survive to that point. Or they may get that lucky break and then do nothing with it because they don't know what they did right to have that dynamite success. And again, I can talk on and on about things from a mechanics and design standpoint. I also review Steam store pages as well to provide even more nightmares for developers who are watching this. But before I kind of do my end of the speech for this presentation, do we have any questions from the audience? I guess what's our time? Oh, we got about 6 minutes. How do you go first?
You mentioned Vampire Survivors earlier, but have you heard of there's a modified game called Volunteer that's being developed that having patches and upgrades even a couple years after it was released in beta?
Yeah, I've heard. Is that the one with the VTubers as well in it? Yeah, I played a little bit of that.
It's sort of similar in the same engine or vein as Vampire Survivors.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of irrelevant. But my question is in regards to what about games that receive a renaissance, like a cult following, and also and then there's what about games that, let's say someone has a grudge against a certain franchise, like Yokai Watch. Like I myself had to suffer from all 3 games because of all of this BS and RNG. It gives SMT, it's SMT light, but unfair. Now,
Shimano.
Yeah, so that's
SMT light.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's unfair.
Yeah, it's unfair.
So, yeah, indeed.
Anyway, my question is, what about games that receive a renaissance?
Yep, those games can attract that hardcore following. Again, Stardew Valley would be another example with bringing the whole farming sim to the PC. And yes, that can attract people, and it can work. That kind of gets to that point about finding that game that scratches that perfect itch. And the problem, however, is that again, the game that does that earns all that credit. The second, third, fourth, 15th, 20th game doesn't have that example. And I can go into a whole speech about kind of why we have that issue where how many of the bullet heaven games have done the same numbers as Vampire Survivors, or have done half the numbers, or a quarter of it? Because again, the clout that you earn from being that first game success affords you a lot. Slay the Spire is a quintessential example of this. I like Slay the Spire, but I like Monster Train more than that. I felt Monster was like a better example of deck builder. It did not do any near the same numbers as Slay the Spire. Because again, that first game gets kind of the prestige of playing, being the first deck builder, or the first bullet heaven, or whatever. And there we go. And yeah, you can have that renaissance, but you have to again be aware that all those people who play that game or experience it for the first time, they may be checking out just strictly from that prestige standpoint. The first new farmings, the first new bullet head. And if you're trying to double or triple that on another game, you may not find that same level of success.
I also have another example.
Yeah.
Back in the day, there was this really obscure music game called the Countermaster for the PS2.
Mm-hmm.
I discovered it through X-Play, through their rear game segment, and it didn't really sell well until I introduced it to a friend, and they introduced it to a friend, so much so that it gained a cult following that was able to get the Tournament lives on the PC. Would that be another example of a cult following that working some games?
Yeah, and that sounds also similar to what happened with Among Us. And when Among Us first came out, no one ever heard about it. And it was, I think, about 2 years later, during kind of like the heights of COVID, we were all kind of trapped in our homes, that a lot of people heard about Among Us, they started covering it, and it blew up incredibly well. And again, all the games that have tried to copy Among Us afterwards have not done anywhere near those numbers. And yeah, again, you can have that prestige, but trying to build off of that can be very tricky. How do you follow up Among Us with another sequel? How do you make a game bigger than that? It's a nightmare, especially for anyone making a live service game. And that's another hour to 2 hour long topic. I think. No, I don't think we will. Oh, it'll be a very short topic. Alright, I think people do.
With role-playing, that publishers haven't said, like, could the same game sell a lot more just because of the publishers attached to it, that type of thing?
I think it does matter. It depends, again, on the quality of the publisher. Some publishers I've seen, their whole thing is just, we'll make a Steam page for you. Okay, see you later. Probably a really good one right now that I've been hearing a lot about is Hooded Horse, who have been doing a lot with strategy games and trying to promote them. But yeah, good publisher does help out a lot. But Hooded Horse. Yeah. They've been publishing a lot of strategy games lately. They published, I think it was Feudal Wars that came out a few months ago. But again, the quality of the publisher does matter. And unfortunately, that's another talk we probably don't have the time for today.
Yeah, so you were using travel countries as an example, and then for the meeting studios, and the next game is Desperado, and your next game is Pirate.
Yeah.
So, like, what do you think is the factor that, like, some people just don't, like, they're tired of, like, the cowboy western aesthetic? Because from what I understand, like, not many people like that genre anymore. And people are like, okay, but I wanted, like, the things from somewhere, whatever, kind of together. Like, how much of that is actually good? That was what I was thinking when I first watched Travel Countries. And I really like this kind of game.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And then I was like, cowboys, I don't really like it because there's, like, a lot of negative connotations sometimes with the Western genre. And then after I kind of forgot about this because I didn't even know the big Pirate game.
Yeah. Yeah, and that can certainly be a factor as well, whereas a lot of people, when they kind of shift their gears in that respect when it comes to franchising the games they make. So what you want as a studio is for people to follow you and like your games regardless of what you make. Like Player Entertainment, I think, is a quintessential example of this. They have made Auction Not Included, Don't Starve, Visible Ink, Mark of the Ninja, Play O's, and each one of those games is fundamentally a different title. And kind of like the dream prospect for a lot of developers to be at that point where you'll have fans who will check you out on name alone. Maybe they don't like a super challenging columnist, but they like you. Maybe they'll give that a check. And that is what you really want to see. But again, when a studio shifts gears that dramatically, you do run that risk of alienating some of your fans. Another classic example is when a developer goes from making like really easy games to making really hard ones, or vice versa. And it is something you have to be aware of. That again, every studio has, based on their games, a limit to their fandom. If you think that your game can sell 20 million copies, well, how many people do you have 20 million fans? Because maybe you will, or maybe you won't. Yep.
And it's to follow up that question because, like, if someone, for example, wants to make different kinds of games and not be like on the whole, like based on what you're saying, it sounds like it's not really a good idea.
I would say if you can make it affordable, again, like if you look at something like with Strange Capital, these four games couldn't be further apart from each other in their design. And they know that these games are not going to have that reach of millions of sales and millions of fans. If you can do things very affordably, keep it very sustainable, you can experiment like that. What you don't want to do is say, I'm going to spend 10 years of my life making a game that I have no idea will succeed on a genre that I've never worked on, and just kind of like close my eyes and hope that people will find it. Because again, we've seen developers who have done just that, who will again double or triple down, and then be left holding the bag as to, well, Why is no one buying this game? And yeah, a lot of that also leads about the marketing of it, which, since we are running up on time, I do not, that will put me over, that will have to pull me off the stage here when I start talking about marketing. But, do you have any more questions? I think you, and then you.
Do you think it's this year connected to that original, or probably the video that started popular?
It's actually a kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't statement. The problem, if you work with something that's 100% original, is you're going to figure out how do you market this. If no one's ever heard of your game before, you're going to do kind of double duty to explain to them, what is this game? An example that I've been telling the developers is this game called the Business Hero Street Mob. And their whole idea is making a successor to Lemonade. And they're putting that in their marketing, like, forefront. Like, the very first 5 seconds of their trailer is showing screens of Lemonade Tycoon to let people know, this is our game. This is what we've been inspired by. And if you're going the other way, trying to make something that someone's already made, you then run into this nasty question. Why should I play your version of a game that's already popular, one that everyone already knows? Again, it goes back to the whole Slay the Spire monster train situation, where you look at something like Inscription, which is a deck builder, but it plays nothing like Slay the Spire. So you either have to go above and beyond, or you have to run in a completely different direction with that design. To go back to Bullet Hell, that's kind of where Brotado has succeeded. Brotado is probably, I think at this point, like the second most recognizable, at least of the older style Bullet Hell. It's older being like 4 years now. And it did that by playing very differently. And then when we look at kind of like the newer ones, Halls of Torment that just came out, Death Must Die, they're now embracing more like the Diablo loop-like systems. They're doing things different. And that's kind of what you want to see. You don't want someone just saying, I'm going to make Vampire Survivors, but instead of vampires, it's vegetables. And it's the exact same game, because no one is going to check that out. And
going to play this game?
Sure. I on my YouTube channel every Wednesday night I dedicate to indies. I will play just about any and every indie game that comes my way, and I will have on my next slide, or I think slide after the next one, my contact information. But before I do that, any final questions? I think we're like right on time. Right?
I have a question.
Sure.
Do you find that licensing really moves the needle? Like, I was like very surprised with the drop off despite getting like another franchise.
I think licensing does help if it is a popular game. Warhammer, I think, being a really good example. Warhammer probably has been licensed to lots of developers who have made very different takes on it. If you ask a Warhammer fan about a game, it could be a strategy game. I've seen a 2D run-and gun, Dark Tide, Space Marines 2. It can help. You do also run into that challenge of that if you betray that license, if you don't do that license justice, their fans will come after you with pitchforks. That's another that we've seen. But if you get a well-known IP for your game and it fits, that can certainly be a boost for it. Anything else? If not, I'll do my kind of end of presentation speech. But thank you everybody for watching, whether you're watching this in live or in person or watching this recorded. If you want to follow me and more my stuff, this is my end of my big pitch spiel here. But these are a few of the books I've read. The Game Design Deep Dive series is kind of my mainstay. Each one covers a genre. I talk about the history, methodology, and kind of everything you've ever wanted to know about a genre but was too afraid to ask. My latest one on shooters came out last month, or I think at the start of September. And my next one will be due, I think, at the early of next year on real-time strategy. And I'm going to be writing Metroidvanias at some point in the next few months. I don't know how I'll fit it in. But if you want to follow up,
What type of games do you like?
I think the answer to that is yes. I've played so many of them. But strategy games, roguelikes, action games, the only ones I'm not huge would probably be like hardcore simulation, racing, driving, that kind of stuff. And my fans will probably throw in stealth as well, so you know how great I am in this sleep. a lot of games. But if you want to follow me or reach out to me, GameWisdom.com is my main website, my YouTube channel where I cover games, talk about games, just keep rambling on about them. And I am on most social medias under GW Blazer. You can find me on Twitter, X, Blue Sky. If you search for Game Wisdom, you will find my name. I've done a really good job, at least in that front, in terms of SEO. But, yeah, that does it from me. So, thank you, everyone.